Hey everyone! I'm glad to be back here again to show you beautiful People More modeling videos. Today I'm gonna tackle this Jagdpanzer 30A from Academy in 35th scale. The format is new, and in this video I will show you the basic assembly and some neat tricks to improve a factory fresh kit for even more realism. As is tradition and the first step of the instructions, I start with assembling the lower hull. I'm using AK's extra thin cement with citrus scent because I felt fancy, and at the time I ordered it there was no Tamiya extra thin. I will use the good old classic Tamiya extra thin as well for more critical parts which need a tiny little extra care, but you can use it for everything. It's highly recommended for a reason. I started the assembly without a plan for the running gear and tracks, so you can see me gluing on the return rollers. Fortunately I noticed my mistake soon enough to remove them without breaking anything. I gave them some treatment with a hobby blade to simulate wear and tear on the rubber parts. I will show you more on the road wheels in a few minutes. So far everything fits well, even the leaf spring suspension gave me no headaches. And I'm so glad the Hetzer has only 4 road wheels. But I still needed some time to clean them up, so look at some editing magic, which makes it somewhat bearable to watch at least. Back to the rubber part upgrades. I used a somewhat dual hobby blade to inflict some damage on the rubbers on the road wheels. I don't like using fresh blades, the dual ones do more authentic damage in my opinion. Just be really careful while applying the technique. Every AFV takes some minor damage, like rocks getting caught between the tracks and road wheels, bricks that were too close during taking a turn on a corner, and maybe some shrapnel even. The next piece of the lower hull gave me quite a few headaches, and I'm pretty sure my neighbor learned some new dirty phrases during this incident. Just be more clever than I was and let this part become one with the hull before you try to attach the next part to it. It will save you some trouble. Other than that, you could use some quick drying cement, maybe mixed with superglue to speed things up. So here's my fuck up. I decided to have the tracks and the wheels in one piece so I could weather the hull more easily. Thing is, I glued the return rollers on so they had to come loose again. After the wrongfully applied cement dried, I attached the wheels dry fitted temporarily to glue on the tracks in the correct position. It just dawned on me that I could have used blue tack to hold the wheel steady on the hull, but it worked anyways, so there's that. The first 2 parts of the link and length tracks were placed with tweezers, and then I applied the good Tamiya stuff. It gives you quite some time to wiggle the tracks in the right position, while having a strong bond once it sets. I made sure to spread the cement on every surface that touches the wheels as well, to give the whole thing the stability it needs later on for weathering and handling. The link pieces were so easy to install after the upper length tracks were put in place. I put the required amount of tracks in one line, and please listen to the instructions, they know what's up. Smeared some Tamiya extra thin over them and let them set for a few minutes. That way the tracks can be manipulated as one, kinda flexible piece around the drive wheel. Rinse and repeat. This is the easiest way to build tracks in my humble opinion, besides the good old metal tracks, but that's a luxury not every kit has to get. The tracks included in the box are quite decent, so there's no need to spend the amount of the kit on metal tracks in this case. See, the whole package, besides one road wheel on each side that did not have enough surface to adhere to, can be removed and reattached once painted and weathered. The rest of the lower hull is easy peasy. I just decided to not use one spare track on the right side of the back to make it more interesting. Maybe the crew used them already. Maybe Hans lost them, who knows. On I go to the interesting part. Customization. I re-scribed the weld seams on the front plate to later on add my own version of it with green stuff. This is needed to make sure it adheres well enough. Just be careful, this Tamiya scribing tool is sharp as hell. If you scratch the surface of the plate, don't worry, we can fix it, we have the technology. The next step is to make the flame cut marks more pronounced. The kit has some by default, but it will get lost after a few coats of primers and paints, so I like to give it some extra love. Again, my hobby knife with the Samba dual blade does the job well. One can use the scribing tool as well, or really rough sandpaper in 70-second scale. I like to go with the hobby blade since it gives me more control. Some thin cement is applied afterwards to remove plastic fuzz and to tone down the effect a bit. On to the armor texture. The Jagdpanzer relied heavily on face-hardened armor, which is fairly flat. To make the model more interesting, I decided to add some texture at least. It's not the most realistic approach, but sometimes a good-looking model is not the same as an accurate model. Rule of cool always wins in my opinion, but to each their own. The texture is created with Tamiya grey putty and Tamiya extra thin cement mixed. I stippled the paste on the upper hole and lower hole with an old medium hard brush. This also covers scratches I accidentally created with the scribing tool. Since the texture needs to be fairly flat on the upper hole, I mixed the cement and putty thin. Rolled homogeneous armor would be a thicker consistency and would have more bumps, just like I did on the lower front of the hull. Technical knowledge is important to create realistic models. Fortunately, our article describes the armor characteristics in detail. To get rid of excess putty, I used a really fine grit sandpaper to sand the upper hull down, just to have a very minimal texture left. I did not sand down the lower front plate to differentiate between rolled homogeneous and face-hardened armor. I will talk some more about texturing at the gun mount preparation later on. Let's now focus on weld seams, since they are a very important and prominent feature in this case. I like to start with the vertical ones. I take some green stuff rolled into a thin noodle and work it in the previously enlarged crevice with a wet toothpick. It's important that the toothpick is wet so that the green stuff does not stick to it. The larger gap helps spreading the green stuff in and holding it once it's dried. Excess can be removed with a toothpick and a hobby blade. The vertical seams are now created with a homemade tool. Go watch Uncle Nightshift. I have to thank him for this and also more ideas. Basically a small, thin U-shape glued to a toothpick and it works really well. The U-shape simulates vertical weld seams, at least for German tanks, since the welding technique used there made these forms. The horizontal shapes were done with the blunt hobby blade, since multiple pass welding was used on horizontal weld lines. Once I was done with creating textures on the upper hull, I glued on the top of the rear deck. Fortunately, Academy created a really well designed kit, so the fit was surprisingly good, and they did not have to fill any spots with putty. Kudos to you, Academy engineers. No, I could have drilled in the holes for homemade handles, but my dumbass decided to glue the hatches on and then the whole upper hull to the lower. So yeah, don't be like me. Think. Fortunately, it was not a total failure and I could drill the holes in easily without breaking anything. The gun mantlet, officially called Topfblende and Saugkopf post-war, needs some texture too, since it's a cast part. I still use the trusty putty and cement mixture, but mixed now in a much thicker ratio. It is stippled on thicker than the whole armor, giving it the illusion of a cast part. I had to be careful not to touch the screws and mounting part on the top of it, since those are not cast parts. If you find the texture too little, just go ahead and apply another coat of putty on top of it, and if it's too much, you can sand it down. Attaching the gun mantlet to the hull was also easy, as the fit is truly great in this kit. An issue could arise if the armor texture has been applied too thick, but since I was going for face-hardened armor, the applied putty layer is not causing any issues with the fit. One should be careful with more thick textures such as cast parts. The mantlet was only treated with putty on the visible part, so the back of it did not cause such an issue either. Grab handles for the crew can be an amazing detail, and fortunately for us they are easy to recreate. The ones included in the kit look okay-ish, but homemade wire handles always look better in my opinion. I took my handy little PE bending tool, looked for the little part that's just the right width, and used it to create 7 same-sized handles with a hobby blade. It's easier and faster than creating your own jig from styrene, and certainly more precise than trying to bend the wire freehand with tweezers. Applying the handles to the kit is another thing, if you're not clever enough to do it before gluing the upper hole to the lower one. I drilled the holes completely through the plastic, so it does not matter how long the wire handles are. Try fitting them is a good idea, since it's always possible the wire has some diameter changes and can get stuck in the middle of the hole. I dabbed some CA glue on the 2 ends, pushed them through with the tweezers, and boom, grab handles are done. The towing rope included in the kit is a simple piece of yarn. Just throw it away, it looks awful and we can do better. I took 3 pieces of thin wire, each 10 cm long, attached them to my drill tool and just wound them up tight with my hand. In hindsight, I should have done 2 more and wound those up together to one thicker rope. But it should do the trick and still looks better than a piece of yarn. I also made a loop and fitted it through the plastic clamp that came with the kit, after cutting the original loop part away. I left one side as is to make it look like it got torn apart during a tow. Last but not least, I attached a long piece of thin wire through the grab handles and side skirt holders, as visible on so many tanks. I can later add vegetation or some other details to make it more interesting, but for now the rope is just enough for me. I didn't glue it on the side skirts yet, since I need to add the wheels and tracks later on, and they would be in the way, so for painting I'll hold them in place with blue tack for the time being. So I'm done with building this kit. I think it's amazing for the price point of about 25 to 30 euros, and there are absolutely no fit issues I encountered while building it, only user errors while building the lower hull rear pieces. It's an amazing platform to practice welding seams and texture, is an amazing little tank hunter on its own, and I certainly had fun building it. I can't wait to slap some paint on it and show you guys how that's going in the next video. If you liked this video and learned something, please consider supporting us on Patreon and visit one of the show outlets. Thanks for watching and keep us in your sights.